She reclined her seat. A flight attendant asked her to stop. She refused. Everyone called her selfish and rude. 47 minutes later, our captain was unconscious over the Pacific Ocean. And that same woman, the one everybody hated, was the only person on board who could save us. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Wednesday, April 3, 2024. 2:47 p.m. Central Time. The boarding process for American Airlines Flight 1893 was already a disaster before the plane even left the gate at Dallas-Fort Worth. Gate D38 looked like a refugee camp. People everywhere. Rolling bags blocking every aisle. A family of 6 arguing in 3 different languages about who was sitting where. A man in a cowboy hat taking up 2 seats with his carry-on while elderly passengers stood searching for space. The overhead bins were already full, and half the plane hadn't boarded yet. This was the reality of modern air travel, a 14-hour endurance test from Dallas to Tokyo Narita, and it hadn't even started yet. You were in seat 23B. Middle seat. Economy class. Not by choice, your company had booked this flight 3 days ago when last-minute business required your presence in Tokyo. Business class was sold out. First class was laughably expensive even on the company card. So here you were, sandwiched in the middle of row 23 on a Boeing 777-300ER carrying 300 passengers across the Pacific Ocean. To your left, in seat 23A, was a businessman in his 50s. He had fallen asleep approximately 4 minutes after the plane reached cruising altitude, which would have been impressive if not for the fact that he was snoring like a broken engine and his left elbow had colonized your armrest territory completely. He smelled faintly of whiskey and pine-scented cologne. His name, based on the business card that had fallen from his jacket pocket, was Robert Chin. Management consultant. He did not manage anything on this flight except to maximize your discomfort. To your right, in seat 23C, was a young mother with twin toddlers. Both children were approximately 2 years old. Both were crying. Not the soft, sad crying of tired children, but the full volume, lung-expanding, ear-splitting crying of small humans who had decided that the interior of a Boeing 777 at 43,000 feet was the appropriate place to have simultaneous existential crises. The mother, clearly exhausted and doing her absolute best, was cycling through snacks, toys, tablets, and gentle singing in a losing battle against infant chaos. You did not blame her. You did not blame the twins. You blamed fate, and the travel booking system, and the fact that somehow, in a plane of 300 people, you had ended up between a snoring man and twin banshees. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the seat directly in front of you. Seat 22B. And the woman sitting in it. She had reclined her seat within 20 minutes of takeoff. That was fine. Seats recline. That is a feature, not a bug, of economy class seating on commercial aircraft. People recline. You understood that. You had reclined your own seat slightly, as much as you could without crushing the poor person behind you. But the woman in 22B had reclined her seat to its absolute maximum position, fully back, completely flat as economy allows, and in doing so, had effectively moved into your lap. Your knees were pressed against the back of her seat. Not touching, pressed. The edge of the seat dug into your kneecaps every time you shifted position. Your tray table, when you tried to lower it, bumped against the reclined seat back and refused to lay flat. It hovered at a useless angle, unable to hold your coffee without threatening to dump it on your lap. You could not reach your bag under the seat in front of you without performing a contortionist maneuver that attracted stares from the passengers across the aisle. You had 6 inches of space between your face and the headrest of seat 22B. You suffered in silence for an hour. Then 2 hours. Then 3. You are, by nature, non-confrontational. You do not like making scenes. You do not like drawing attention to yourself in public places. You were raised by parents who believed that politeness was next to godliness, and that asking a stranger to change their behavior was the social equivalent of starting a small war. So you sat. And you endured. And you told yourself it was fine. Only 11 more hours to go. You could handle 11 hours. But at hour 3, with Robert Chen's elbow firmly in your ribs, the twins behind achieving new decibel heights, and your knees aching from being pressed against unyielding seatback plastic, something inside you reached its limit. It was a small limit, but it was a limit nonetheless. You leaned forward. You tapped the seat gently, one soft knock of your knuckle against the reclined headrest. You said, in your most polite, most apologetic, most carefully non-confrontational voice, "Excuse me. I'm so sorry to bother you. I really am. But would you mind putting your seat up just a little bit? Even an inch or two would help. It's really quite tight back here, and my knees are." You never finished the sentence. The woman in seat 22B did not turn around. She did not look back. She did not acknowledge your existence as a fellow human being sharing a pressurized metal tube at 43,000 feet. Instead, in a move so perfectly, infuriatingly deliberate that it seemed choreographed, she reached up to the side of her seat, found the recline button, and pushed. Her seat moved back another fraction of an inch. Not much. Barely measurable. But enough. Enough to make the point. And then she spoke. Her voice was flat. Dismissive. Entirely without warmth. "I paid for this seat. I have every right to recline it. Deal with it." That was all she said. Then silence. The seat stayed fully reclined. She did not look back. You never saw her face. In the seat 23B, you felt something hot and ugly rise in your chest. Not quite rage, you were too polite for rage, but a simmering, self-righteous fury that felt entirely justified. You mentally composed the Reddit post. You revised it 3 times in your head. You imagined the comments. You imagined the upvotes. You imagined the satisfying chorus of strangers on the internet validating your outrage over this inconsiderate, entitled, selfish woman who represented everything wrong with modern air travel and indeed with human civilization as a whole. You hated her. You genuinely, thoroughly hated this stranger whose face you had never even seen. You hated the back of her headrest. You hated the particular shade of gray of the airline seat fabric. You spent 47 minutes, you counted, because time moves strangely when you are quietly furious, fantasizing about karmic revenge. About this woman somehow, someway getting exactly what she deserved from an indifferent universe. You had absolutely no idea who she was. You had absolutely no idea what she was dealing with. And in exactly 47 minutes, she was going to save your life. The woman in seat 22B was Commander Rachel Torres, United States Navy, currently on a form of classified leave that her own family only partially understood. She was 36 years old. She had brown eyes that could cut glass when she was focused. She had hands that were steady as stone when she needed them to be, hands that had, over the course of nearly 3,000 flight hours, guided a $50 million EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft through combat conditions that most people could not imagine in their worst nightmares. Her call sign was Jammer. She had earned it for her specialty in electronic countermeasures, the art of blinding enemy radar, jamming communications, disrupting weapons guidance systems. Other pilots called her aggressive. Uncompromising. They said she flew like she was personally angry at the sky. They said this with respect. They said it with a slight edge of fear. Because pilots who flew like Jammer Torres was born to fly were the ones you wanted on your wing in a bad situation, and were also the ones who occasionally scared you in a good situation. She had 2,890 flight hours. She had completed 147 carrier landings, which is an almost incomprehensible number, because a carrier landing is essentially controlled violence, a 65,000-pound aircraft slamming onto a moving deck at 150 miles per hour and catching a wire the width of your wrist. Most pilots consider 20 carrier landings proof of genuine skill. Rachel Torres had done it 147 times, many of them at night, many in bad weather, some under conditions that the official reports described in careful, neutral language that did not capture how close everyone came to dying. She had flown 89 combat missions over Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. She was traveling to Tokyo under orders she could not discuss, carrying materials she could not acknowledge existed, on an assignment so sensitive that she had been given barely 36 hours of notice and the only available seat on the flight had been 22B in economy. She had not slept in 4 days. Not adequately, not the real, deep, restorative sleep that a human body requires. She had dozed in fragments, jolted awake by nightmares she was not allowed to describe even in therapy, because the events that had caused them were classified at a level that her therapist did not have clearance for. 3 months ago, a mission over a location she could not name had gone catastrophically wrong. People had died. Good people. People she had known well. People who had trusted her. The official investigation was ongoing. The official findings were classified. And Rachel Torres was walking through the world carrying the weight of what she knew and could not say, and the Navy had suggested, not ordered, but strongly suggested, that she speak to a mental health professional, and she had done so, and the mental health professional had told her things she already knew about trauma and processing and the importance of sleep and social connection, and none of it had helped because she still could not tell anyone the actual thing that had happened, and so the trauma sat in her like a stone she could not pass. She was taking 3 medications. One for pain, chronic neck pain from an ejection injury sustained 2 years ago when a missile hit her growler over Syrian airspace and she had to punch out at Mach 1.2, which is faster than a bullet, and the ejection seat had hit her spine with the force of a car crash and left her with compression damage in 2 vertebrae that the Navy Medical Board was currently reviewing for possible medical retirement. One for anxiety. One for insomnia, though the insomnia was winning. She had reclined her seat to its maximum position because that specific angle, 2 degrees more reclined than comfortable, was the only position in which she could hold her neck such that the compressed vertebrae did not send shooting pain down her left arm. She had learned this from 6 weeks of physical therapy. She had documented it. She had a medical form in her bag, the classified bag that contained things she could not name, that explained her condition. She had not told you any of this when you tapped her seat, because she was barely holding herself together, and every human interaction required energy she did not have, and she was terrified that if she started explaining herself she would begin crying and would not be able to stop, and she was a U.S. Navy commander on a classified assignment and she could not afford to fall apart on an airplane in economy class over the Pacific Ocean. So she had been rude to you instead. It was the easier option. She was not proud of it. All of this was invisible to you. As it is invisible, always, with everyone. Up in the front of the aircraft, beyond the locked door and the galley and the first-class curtain, Captain James Mitchell was having a perfectly normal day. 52 years old, 31 years with American Airlines, 23,000 flight hours logged, more than enough to circle the Earth at the equator multiple times. He had flown this exact route, Dallas to Tokyo, so many times that the Pacific Ocean felt like a familiar commute. He was thinking about his retirement, which was 2 years away. He was thinking about his garden in Phoenix, which needed new irrigation. He was thinking about his grandchildren. First Officer Daniel Park, 34, was reviewing the arrival procedures for Tokyo Narita. 7 years with American. 6,800 hours. Competent, careful, and genuinely good at his job. He had never flown the Pacific alone. He had never expected to. Tokyo Radio, American 1893, maintaining flight level 430, Mitchell said into his headset. His voice was the voice of a man who had done this 10,000 times. American 1893, Tokyo Radio, Roger. Continue flight level 430. Routine. Professional. Calm. The Pacific stretched ahead of them, 4,000 miles of ocean, the deepest and loneliest water on Earth. Below, there was nothing for 1,000 miles in any direction except water. At 43,000 feet, the curvature of the Earth was just barely visible. The sky above was the deep, dark blue of the upper atmosphere. It was, by any measure, a beautiful day to be alive and flying. At 5:34 p.m., Captain James Mitchell reached for his coffee cup. His hand stopped. Not slowly. It just stopped. Halfway to the cup. Arrested in mid-motion as if someone had pressed pause. He said, "I feel strange." Then he collapsed forward. His body fell against the yoke, the control column, with his full weight. The Boeing 777's nose pitched downward. 12 degrees in 8 seconds. In the cabin, passengers lurched forward against their seatbelts. Overhead bins rattled. Cups fell. "Captain! Captain!" First Officer Park's voice cracked. He grabbed the controls. He pushed back against the yoke. The aircraft's nose came up. He stabilized the plane. All of this took 8 seconds, and in those 8 seconds, Daniel Park's world changed entirely. Mitchell was unconscious. Slumped sideways now, against the window. His face had gone slack in a way that Park recognized from first aid training as very, very bad. A hemorrhagic stroke, though Park did not know the medical term, had erupted in the captain's brain, a cerebral aneurysm that had been quietly growing for 3 years without a single symptom, without a single warning, and had chosen this moment, over the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, to announce itself. Park pressed the intercom for the cabin crew. His hands were shaking. He could feel his own heartbeat in his ears. "This is First Officer Park. We have a medical emergency in the cockpit. I need senior cabin crew to the flight deck immediately." Then he thought about what to do next. He was alone at the controls of a 300-ton aircraft carrying 300 people. The nearest diversion airport was Cold Bay, Alaska, over 1,200 miles away. The weather there was deteriorating. He was a good pilot. He knew that. But he had never faced anything remotely like this, and the panic was a physical thing, a cold weight pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. He picked up the passenger address microphone. He thought carefully about what to say. He said it anyway. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Park. I need to inform you that we have a medical emergency involving the captain. The captain is currently incapacitated. I am in control of the aircraft. I want to assure you that the aircraft is stable and safe. However, I need to ask an urgent question. If there is anyone aboard this aircraft with flying experience, commercial, military, private, any experience at all, please identify yourself to a flight attendant immediately. Thank you." He set down the microphone. In the cabin, silence fell like a weight. The silence lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then the cabin broke open. People began crying. Immediately, suddenly, without transition, the kind of crying that happens when the brain processes danger faster than the mind can manage it. A man in row 15 began praying loudly in Korean. A woman 2 rows behind you grabbed her husband's arm with both hands. The twins in 23C, who had been mid-tantrum, went suddenly, eerily quiet, as if they sensed that something had shifted in the adult world around them. Robert Chen in 23A was awake now. He had snapped upright at the pitch of the aircraft, and he was looking around with the sharp, assessing eyes of a man who made his living analyzing situations. He was scared. He was managing it. Barely. You were not managing it at all. You were sitting in 23B with your hands gripping the armrests, both armrests, the one Robert Chen had occupied and the one between you and the twins' mother, and you were thinking with terrible clarity, "We are going to crash. We are going to fall into the Pacific Ocean, which is 1,000 miles wide and miles deep, and we are going to disappear into it, and they will not find the plane for years, and your mother is going to watch a news story about it." And then the seat in front of you moved. Seat 22B. The fully reclined seat that had been crushing your knees for 3 hours. It moved forward, slowly, mechanically, the electric motor whirring, until it was upright. Then a hand appeared over the top of the headrest. Then a figure stood. The woman in 22B stood up. She turned around. You saw her face for the first time. She was in her mid-30s. Dark brown eyes that were red-rimmed and shadowed with the particular darkness that comes not from one bad night but from many. Her face was angular and precise, the face of someone who had been very attractive before exhaustion had carved itself into every line. She was wearing a faded navy blue hoodie, unzipped, and beneath it a t-shirt, gray, worn, with the words U.S. Navy printed across the chest in letters that had been washed to near invisibility. Her hands, gripping the headrest, were not shaking. Her eyes were fully alert. She looked directly at you. And when she spoke, her voice was entirely different from the flat, dismissive tone she had used when she told you to deal with it. This voice was hard. Certain. The voice of someone who expected to be obeyed. I'm going to the cockpit, she said. When I go, you're going to move into my seat. Sit in 22B. You complained about legroom, you'll have all of it now. Later, when this is over, you will understand why I needed that seat reclined the way it was. But right now I need you to move. Now. You stared at her. Your mouth opened. She did not wait for your response. She climbed over you, efficiently, almost without touching you, and stepped into the aisle. She moved toward the front of the aircraft with the kind of purposeful, ground-eating stride that belongs to people who are accustomed to moving through hostile environments without hesitation. Passengers pressed back against their seats to let her through. Something about her made people get out of the way. You moved into seat 22B. Mechanically. In shock. The legroom was extraordinary. You had never felt so terrible about legroom in your life. Robert Chen leaned over from 23A. Who is she? He said. I don't know, you said. I think she might be Navy. She's going to the cockpit. He looked toward the front of the aircraft. He nodded slowly. Then we might actually survive this. Yeah, you said. We might. Senior Flight Attendant Maria Santos had been with American Airlines for 19 years. She had seen a lot. A passenger cardiac arrest over the Atlantic. A small fire in the galley on a flight to Sao Paulo. A passenger who turned out to be on a federal watch list somewhere over Kansas. She had a calm, competent manner that most people found reassuring, and she was not easily flustered. The woman from 22B flustered her slightly. Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat immediately, Maria said, positioning herself between this passenger and the cockpit door. I'm Commander Rachel Torres, United States Navy, the woman said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I fly EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft. I have 2,890 flight hours including 147 carrier landings. I have flown high-performance aircraft with glass cockpit systems similar to the 777. Your first officer is alone up there, and I can help him fly this aircraft and land it safely. You need to let me in. Now. Maria looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. She had protocols. She had training. The training said verify credentials. The training said consult the purser. The training said there were procedures. She opened the cockpit door. Sometimes experience overrides procedure. Sometimes you look at a person and you understand, in the part of you that is older than training, that they are exactly what they say they are. Rachel stepped into the cockpit. First Officer Daniel Park was managing the aircraft with white-knuckled focus. Captain Mitchell had been moved to the jump seat behind, where another flight attendant was checking his pulse and airways. He was alive. Unconscious, but alive, though the hemorrhagic bleed in his brain was doing damage that would take surgeons hours to address and months to assess. Park heard the door. He glanced back. He saw the woman. First Officer Park. Rachel's voice was calm and level. My name is Commander Rachel Torres. I'm United States Navy, EA-18G pilot, 2,890 hours. I'm here to help you fly this aircraft. Tell me your status. Park took a breath. He almost laughed, not from humor, but from the particular, desperate relief of a man drowning who sees a hand reaching down toward him. You're really Navy? Yes. Captain had a stroke. Massive. He's unconscious. Maybe, I don't know if he's going to make it. I'm alone. We're 1,200 miles from the nearest airport. Cold Bay, Alaska. Weather up there is bad and getting worse. I've been flying Pacific routes for 7 years but I have never, he stopped. He started again. I've never done anything like this. No one has, Rachel said. That's what makes it hard. Move over. I'm taking the left seat. You're not rated on a 777. No. But I know how this cockpit works in principle, and you need a second set of hands that isn't shaking. I'll advise. You fly. Between us, we get everyone to the ground. Are you with me? Park nodded. Good. Rachel slid into the captain's seat. She looked at the instrument panel, hundreds of switches, screens, indicators, and she catalogued it with the rapid, systematic efficiency of a pilot who had spent her career making sense of complex cockpits under pressure. Different aircraft. Same principles. Thrust, altitude, heading, fuel, systems. The fundamentals never changed. Okay, she said. Talk to me. Where are we exactly? Position 53 degrees north, 172 degrees west, Park said, his voice steadying as he had something to do, someone to report to. Altitude 43,000. Speed Mach 0.84. Fuel 54%. Cold Bay is bearing 042 magnetic. About 1,190 miles. Good. Current weather at Cold Bay. Wind 320 at 35 knots, gusting 48. Visibility 1 mile. Freezing rain. Ceiling 400 feet. And they say it's getting worse. Rachel looked at the fuel calculation in her head. 4 hours of flying, roughly, to Cold Bay. Maybe a bit more. They had enough fuel. The weather was very bad. She had landed in worse. She had landed on a carrier at night in 20-foot seas in weather that made this look like a pleasant afternoon. Her neck was beginning to hurt badly. She had been sitting in the tilted position in seat 22B for hours, and now she was upright in the captain's seat, and the compressed vertebrae in her cervical spine were registering their complaint in a way that ran from her neck down her left arm in a sheet of electric fire. She had no medication left in her accessible pocket. The rest was in her bag, under the seat of 22B. She breathed through it. All right, she said. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to fly this aircraft to Cold Bay. Together. You're going to be pilot flying, that means the controls are yours, you make the inputs. I'm going to monitor systems, run checklists, manage communications, and talk you through every step of the approach and landing. You are a good pilot, Park. You know this aircraft better than I do. I know weather flying and instrument approaches and how to stay focused when everything is going wrong at once. Together we have everything we need. Are you ready to fly? Yes, Park said. And then, with more certainty, yes. I'm ready. For hours, the first hour was about finding rhythm. Rachel took stock of the systems methodically. She asked Park about the aircraft's condition, its quirks, anything that wasn't behaving perfectly. Nothing was. The 777 was performing exactly as designed, stable, efficient, reliable. Boeing built excellent aircraft. This was good news. The aircraft was not the problem. The weather at their destination was the problem, and the fact that Park had never landed solo in anything approaching these conditions, and the fact that Rachel's left arm was hurting in a way she was monitoring carefully to make sure it was muscular and spinal and not cardiac. She radioed the situation to Anchorage Center, the air traffic control authority for this region. The controller's voice, when they understood what they were dealing with, shifted to the particular calm professionalism of someone who has trained for emergencies and is now executing that training. American 1893, Anchorage Center. Copy your emergency. You're cleared direct Cold Bay. Emergency services are being notified. Cold Bay is standing by. Wind is currently 320 at 40 gusting 53. We will keep you updated. Thank you, Anchorage, Rachel said. We'll be with you for the next 4 hours. Please have the weather updates every 30 minutes. In the cabin, Maria had made a second announcement, calmer this time. A pilot was assisting First Officer Park. The aircraft was stable. They were diverting to Cold Bay, Alaska, as a precaution, estimated landing in approximately 4 hours. Passengers should remain seated with seatbelts fastened. The cabin did not entirely calm down. But it settled into a collective, anxious endurance. People held hands. People prayed. People who had been strangers an hour ago were now talking to each other in the particular intimate way that comes from shared crisis. The businessman, Robert Chen, had stopped performing his consultant's emotional detachment and was speaking quietly to you about his daughter in Seattle, whom he needed to call when this was over. You sat in seat 22B and watched the cockpit door and thought about the woman behind it. You thought about her face, the exhaustion, the red-rimmed eyes, the faded navy t-shirt. You thought about the voice she had used when she told you to move, and how entirely different it was from the voice she had used when she told you to deal with it. You thought about the 2 inches of seat recline that had seemed so important 3 hours ago. You felt the particular sick shame of someone who has discovered, too late, that their judgment was catastrophically wrong. The second hour brought worse news from the weather. American 1893, Anchorage Center. Cold Bay update. Wind is now 320 at 44 gusting 58. Visibility dropping, currently half a mile in freezing rain. Ceiling 300 feet. Temperature -3 Celsius. The trend is not improving. Copy that, Anchorage. Thank you, Rachel said. She turned to Park. You heard. Half a mile visibility. 300-foot ceiling. Those are Cat 2 conditions. Yes. In 40-knot crosswinds. Yes. I've never. I know, Rachel said. I have. Different aircraft, but the physics are the same. I'm going to tell you something true, Park. Carrier landings in bad weather are harder than what we're going to do today. On a carrier, the runway is moving. It's pitching and rolling in the swell. You can't go around if you miss the wire, there's not enough deck. The tolerances are inches, not feet. A runway in Alaska, even in these conditions, is a 1/4 mile of solid, stationary concrete. I will take these odds every time over what I've done before. Park almost smiled. You're trying to make me feel better. I'm trying to make you accurate, Rachel said. There's a difference. Feel better later. Be accurate now. During the 3rd hour, the flashback hit her. She was looking at the altimeter and suddenly she was not in the cockpit of a 777 over Alaska. She was in the cockpit of her growler over the unnameable location, and the warning lights were screaming, and she was making a decision she would spend the rest of her life carrying, and there were voices on the radio that she would hear in her sleep for years, and then the flash of something she could not describe. She blinked. The 777 cockpit came back. The instruments. Park's profile as he monitored the autopilot. The hum of the engines. Commander. Park had noticed. You okay? Fine, she said. Tired. Stay on course. I'm here. She was not fine. But she was here. And being here was what mattered. Her neck was a landscape of pain now. Every movement sent signals she was learning to route around, the way a city routes traffic around a blocked road. She breathed steadily. She kept her voice level. She monitored the systems and updated Park and answered the radio and did not let one single thing she was feeling into her voice or her hands or her face. This was something she had learned over years and 89 combat missions: the body does not stop sending its signals. Fear does not go away. Pain does not stop. You do not transcend these things. You simply learn to work alongside them, to carry them while you do what you need to do, to let them be present without letting them be in charge. The fourth hour was for preparation. 50 miles, Rachel said. Time to brief the approach. Walk me through it. Step by step. The runway at Cold Bay is 14/32, runway 14 is our approach, heading 140 degrees. The wind is from 320. That gives us a direct right crosswind of roughly 40 knots. This is significant. Here is what you are going to do: you are going to fly the approach with the nose crabbed into the wind, nose pointed to the left of the runway, maybe 15 to 20 degrees. This means the aircraft is tracking toward the runway even though the nose isn't pointing at it. The wind is pushing you right, you're pointing left, these two things cancel out. With me? With you. At about 50 feet, I will call it, you are going to apply right rudder to align the nose with the runway centerline. The main gear touches, and then you straighten out. This is called a crab and kick technique. The 777 can handle significant crosswind on landing. You have the aircraft authority to do this. The key thing is trusting the approach even when the nose isn't pointed where you're going. It will feel wrong. It is correct. Trust your instruments and trust my calls. What if If you need to go around, call it and we go around. Cold Bay has enough runway. We have enough fuel for 2 approaches. But you're not going to need the second one. How do you know? Because I'm going to be in this seat next to you the whole way down, Rachel said. And I have never let an aircraft I was responsible for hit the ground wrong. I'm not starting today. The landing, Cold Bay Tower, American 1893, 15 miles on the localizer, ILS approach runway 14. American 1893, Cold Bay Tower. You are cleared ILS approach runway 14. Current conditions, wind 320 at 42 gusting 57 knots. Visibility half mile in freezing rain. RVR is 2,400. Runway condition, braking action reported as poor. Emergency equipment is standing by. You are not, repeat not, in radar contact, confirm when runway in sight. Cleared ILS 14, American 1893, Rachel said. She looked at Park. All of that was manageable information. Poor braking action means use more runway and more reversers. We have runway to use. Gear down on my call. Ready. The approach unfolded in a sequence of calls: altitude, airspeed, instrument crosschecks, a litany that had been refined by decades of aviation procedure into the most efficient language possible for keeping aircraft alive. Rachel called and Park responded, and the 777 descended through the clouds, through the gray murk of the Alaskan weather system, through 3,000 feet and 2,000 and 1,000. Gear down, Rachel called. Gear down. 3 green, Park confirmed. 3 lights. 3 wheels locked. Flaps 30. Speed 152. Flaps 30. Holding 152. 500 feet. You're drifting right of centerline. Crab left, more, good. That's it. Hold that. The nose looks wrong. It's right. Trust the instruments. The nose looks. Trust the instruments, Park. Silence. Then, trusting the instruments. 200 feet. Ground is coming. Wind is steady, this is good. You're centered on the localizer. Glide slope is on. Don't touch anything. Don't touch anything. Copy. 100 feet. Runway lights in sight. Do you have visual? Visual. I have the runway. 50 feet. Now, right rudder, align the nose. Now. Park kicked the right rudder pedal. The nose swung right. The runway's centerline aligned under them like a road appearing from fog. The main gear touched. Hard, harder than a normal landing, which was correct, which was the right amount of force for this crosswind, this runway condition. The aircraft shuddered. Nose gear, now. Park pushed forward. The nose gear came down. All 3 points of the landing gear on solid ground. Reverse thrust, brakes. The engines reversed. The brakes bit. The aircraft decelerated through the freezing rain, through the wind that was still trying to push it sideways, and the landing roll seemed to go on forever, and then it did not. The aircraft slowed. It stopped. 2,000 feet of runway remaining. Silence in the cockpit. Then Park began to cry. Not quietly, the way that people cry when something enormous releases at once, when the body decides it no longer needs to hold itself together. His shoulders shook. His hands were still on the controls. Rachel reached over and put her hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said. "You landed it. You saved everyone on this plane." Park tried to speak. He stopped. Tried again. "I couldn't have done it without you. I was panicking. I was completely panicking. You kept me together." "How did you?" "You would have figured it out," Rachel said. "You're a good pilot. You know this aircraft. You just needed someone to tell you that you could do it. That's what commanders do, we make people believe they're capable of things they don't know they're capable of yet." "Cold Bay Tower, American 1893, Rachel said into the radio. "We're down. All 300 souls accounted for. Captain Mitchell requires immediate medical attention on arrival." American 1893, Cold Bay Tower, copy. "Outstanding work up there. Emergency services are meeting you. Welcome to Cold Bay." Captain James Mitchell was taken off the aircraft on a stretcher. He was alive. The flight attendants had administered CPR for several minutes during the flight when his pulse became weak, and the defibrillator had been used once. He would spend 6 weeks in a hospital in Anchorage. He would survive. Barely. The surgeons would later describe the hemorrhage as the kind of event that kills most people within minutes. Mitchell's survival was, by medical standards, improbable. The 300 passengers of American Airlines Flight 1893 evacuated to the small terminal building of Cold Bay Airport, which was not designed to receive 300 people at once, and handled it with the particular stoic pragmatism of a facility in the Alaskan bush. Coffee was found. Blankets appeared from somewhere. People sat on the floor and on luggage carts and on the edges of equipment and drank bad coffee and called their families and cried and laughed and held each other the way people do when they have just been reminded that life is not guaranteed. Rachel Torres was the last person to leave the cockpit. She walked slowly, the pain medication had completely worn off now, and her neck and arm announced themselves with every step. She was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. She had been awake for 5 days, had spent the last 4 hours managing one of the most complex and high-stakes situations of her career, and the PTSD and the grief and everything she carried and could not name was pressing at the edges of her consciousness like water against a dam. She walked through the cabin toward the exit. Someone started clapping. It spread the way these things spread, from 1 person to 3 to 10 to everyone, the whole cabin of 300 frightened, grateful, overwhelmed human beings giving everything they had in the only way immediately available to them. The sound was enormous in the confined space. Rachel looked uncomfortable. She was not someone who sought applause. She was not someone who wanted to be seen. She had spent her career doing things that no one outside a classified briefing room would ever know about, and she had made peace with that. The attention felt like too much. Like something she did not deserve, or had not earned in the way these people seemed to think. She nodded. She kept walking. She stopped at row 22. You were standing. You had stood when the clapping started, not knowing what else to do, and now you were face to face with the woman from seat 22B. The woman you had hated for her seat recline. The woman you had composed furious imaginary Reddit posts about. The woman who had just spent 4 hours in a dark cockpit over the Pacific talking a panicking first officer down from the edge and then landing a 777 in conditions that would have tested experienced commercial pilots. She looked at you. "Can I have my seat back?" she said. "I need to sleep. I haven't slept in 5 days." You moved immediately. You stepped into the aisle without hesitation. "I'm sorry," you said. The words came out wrong, too small for what you meant. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I judged you. I thought you were being selfish and entitled, and I had no idea what you were dealing with, or who you were, or why you needed." "You couldn't have known," Rachel said. She sat down. She pressed the button. The seat went back, all the way back, to its maximum recline, that same recline that had driven you to quiet fury 3 hours ago and now looked like the most reasonable thing in the world. "I could have told you," she said, looking at the seat back. "I didn't. That was on me. I was rude because I was barely functional and every interaction felt like too much, and that's not your fault. You had a legitimate complaint." "No," you said. You did," she said. "It's okay. You didn't know. I didn't tell you. We were both working with the information we had." She closed her eyes. "Thank you," you said. "For saving us. All of us. Just flying," she said. Her voice was already going soft with approaching sleep. "I'm a pilot. That's what I do. Now please let me sleep." You stepped back. You sat down in seat 23B. You watched the back of seat 22B, fully reclined, just as it had been before, and you thought about all the things you had thought about this woman when you knew nothing about her. All the judgments that had come so easily, so automatically, constructed from so little information. You thought about how certain you had been. How righteous your anger had felt. Robert Chin, 23A, was watching too. After a long time, he spoke. "We never know," he said. "No," you agreed. "We never know." Cold Bay was a refueling stop. A replacement captain flew in from Anchorage, a retired American Airlines pilot who lived in Kodiak and kept his certifications current, who arrived in a small Cessna 4 hours after the emergency landing, grim-faced and businesslike. The aircraft was inspected by maintenance engineers who were also brought in. The 777 was cleared for continued flight, and American Airlines Flight 1893 continued on to Tokyo Narita, 6 hours late. Rachel Torres slept through all of it. She slept through the refueling and the inspection and the boarding and the takeoff from Cold Bay. She slept through the Pacific crossing. She was still asleep when the aircraft began its descent into Tokyo. You watched the back of her seat for 6 hours. Not obsessively, you slept a little, ate the meal they served, watched half a film without seeing it. But your eyes returned to 22B the way your tongue returns to a sore tooth. You were not watching her. You were watching yourself. Watching the person you had been 3 hours before the emergency, the person who had hated this stranger with such comfortable certainty. When the aircraft landed at Narita and the passengers began to gather their things, Rachel woke. She woke the way military people sometimes wake, suddenly, fully, without transition. She looked around the cabin with a quick, assessing glance, registered that they were on the ground, and stood. You were already in the aisle, your bag in hand. You stepped aside to let her out. You looked at each other. There was a great deal that could have been said. None of it was adequate. "Safe travels," you said. She nodded. "You too." At the gate, she was met by two people in civilian clothes who had the particular posture and alertness of people who were not actually civilian. They spoke to her briefly. She picked up a bag that had been brought separately, the classified bag, presumably, that she had never let out of her sight. She walked through a door that said authorized personnel only and was gone. You never saw her again. 3 days later, back home, you wrote about it. Not the Reddit post you had composed in your head at hour 3 of the flight, the one about entitled passengers and the death of basic human courtesy. You wrote something different. You wrote about the woman in seat 22B. About what you had thought of her and what she had turned out to be. About the gap between those two things, and how wide that gap was, and how easily you had lived inside the wrong picture of her. You wrote, I judged a stranger based on 2 inches of seat recline. I built a whole story about her, her character, her selfishness, her sense of entitlement, from that single data point. I was completely wrong. Not a little wrong. Completely. Every assumption I made was wrong. The selfishness was a medical necessity I didn't know about. The rudeness was exhaustion I couldn't see. The entitlement was a woman barely holding herself together in circumstances I couldn't imagine. You wrote, she was carrying things I couldn't see. She was in pain I didn't know about. She was on a mission she couldn't describe. She had been through things that entitled her, if that word means anything, to every inch of recline on every aircraft she ever flies for the rest of her life, and she would never ask for that, and she would never say so, and the world would never know unless something extraordinary happened to reveal it. You wrote, something extraordinary happened. You wrote, before, excuse me, your seat is reclined. After, ma'am, you just saved 300 lives. I never want to forget the distance between those 2 sentences. I never want to forget how small my concern was and how invisible her burden was and how quickly, completely, and without any drama or announcement, she put down her exhaustion and her pain and her trauma and walked to the cockpit and brought us home. You wrote, I will never judge a reclined seat again. Not because the discomfort isn't real, it is real, and asking politely is always reasonable, but because I will never again assume I know what's on the other side of a stranger's behavior. The story I build about the person in front of me is almost always incomplete. Sometimes it's completely wrong. The person who is rude to you might be suffering in ways you cannot see. The person who seems selfish might be managing a pain you will never experience. And occasionally, rarely, once in however many flights it takes for the universe to arrange these things, the person who annoyed you is the only reason you are alive. 6 months after the flight, a brief item appeared in a naval aviation publication, the kind of thing most people would never read. It described the Navy's decision to return a named aviator to active flight status following a period of medical and psychological evaluation. The aviator was described as having demonstrated exceptional performance under pressure during a recent incident. The aviator's call sign was given. Jammer. You hoped she was sleeping better. You hoped the nightmares had eased. You hoped that somewhere over whatever ocean she was flying over, in whatever cockpit she had finally been cleared to return to, she was doing the thing she was born to do, Mach .84 and climbing, the sky above and the instrument steady and her hands as certain as they had ever been. You never knew her. You never will. But you owe her everything. She is sitting, somewhere right now, in a seat that is fully reclined. Let her have it.